Sir, it is live now.
So we are all back again at 6 p.m. This is probably a 90th day of lockdown series and now unlocking up. We have been exposed to different yogic techniques, practicals, theory, Ayurveda, and trying to understand the importance of integrated healthcare, bringing to you the very best among the yoga practitioners, among the physicians, the scientists, the students from across the world. Today we are joined by a very eminent person from Hungary, from Europe. He is Professor Ferenc Ruzsa. He has a PhD in Sāṁkhya philosophy and is head of the Department of Buddhist and Tibetan Studies. And he teaches philosophy and indology at ELTE, University of Budapest. And he earned a DSc, or a Doctor of Hungarian from the Doctor of Hungarian Academy of Sciences in philosophy. He also obtained his MA in indology and philosophy. His primary focus of research is Sankhya and Visheshika, and Indo-Aryan and Dravidian linguistics. He is well published, and he's with us today, and we will try to understand his thoughts and his research, and we will also try to ground our own memories of coming to yoga scholars and looking at the integrative medicine from various perspectives, how and why it is grounded in philosophy, Sankhya philosophy. If it has any relation or not, we will try to find out. So he will try to make it simple for us. But if you find it hard, just be there, try to understand. And the panel is also here with us. We will ask questions. You're also welcome to come to Facebook chat and ask questions. I will try to look up to my phone and ask those questions on your behalf. And in that informal chat, we will be able to learn what he has to tell about the Sankhya philosophy. Our journal, Integrative Medicine Case Reports, whose platform is reaching out to you to basically invite you to submit research articles from outside the discipline of modern medicine or as add-on to integrative medicine. This particular chapter, this particular talk is a part of that focus of integrative medicine to spell out or to roll out the beauty of integrative medicine, which is evidence-based, which is based on philosophy, which is based on facts. So I invite Dr. Rusa to come forward and deliver your talk. Over to Dr. Rusa.
Thank you, Dr. Anand, for the introduction and for inviting me for this talk, which is something like an impossibility to summarize Sankhya in a quarter of an hour, but I'm trying my best. So historically speaking, Sankhya seems to be clearly the earliest Indian philosophy. We can see it because it's referred to in the epics, in the Mahabharata. More specifically, it's a very important building block, groundwork in the Bhagavad Gita. Also, we can see that the Upanishads already know Sankhya philosophy, and also that the Buddha knew Sankhya philosophy. Actually, one of his masters belonged to the Sankhya school. Sankhya has always been regarded as a kind of a sister philosophy to yoga. And that's perfectly right. And therefore, because we can see that yoga practice is immensely old, so we can see clearly yoga positions on the seals of the Indus Valley civilization. Of course, they are positions that's yoga practice. You cannot definitely say that it's yoga philosophy already then, but well, why would you do yoga in the pre-modern world if not for some kind of transcendental motive? So we could say that very probably many elements of yoga and also of Sankhya philosophy go back before history to the age of the Indus Valley civilization. Now, in the early classical age of India, that is around the beginning of our era, Sankhya was clearly the dominant Indian philosophy. So it's not like today, something like Vedanta being the most prestigious. At that time, 2000 years ago, Sankhya was by far the best known and used philosophy. We can find Sankhya everywhere. So not only in the epics, as I have already mentioned, but you find it in all the early texts of Ayurveda, both in the Charaka Samhita and in the Sushruta Samhita. Sankhya background is very important and very explicit. Also, you find a Sankhya, detailed Sankhya introduction in the Manusmriti. So in Manu's code of law, the Manava Dharma Shastra. And basically everywhere in literature you find references to it. So it was the dominant philosophy. At something like the end of this age came the classical formulation of Sankhya philosophy. That's the Sankhya Karika, the verses on Sankhya written by Ishvara Krishna, probably in the 4th century of our era. And Sankhya is essentially a one-text philosophy. There are many commentaries, of course, but they don't add anything important new for more than 1,000 years to Ishvara Krishna's work. It's not because they had no good ideas. It's simply because the formulation of Ishvara Krishna is so perfect. The philosophical part is absolutely coherent, logical, convincing, and very deep. And also, as I mentioned, it was quite widely known and accepted. Now comes as a surprise that, well, Sankhya disappears. It's no longer an alive system of philosophy, at least what's the appearance on the surface. But that's an appearance that's not reality. In reality, Sankhya is still the most alive philosophy of India, just its name is not that frequent nowadays. In all Indian philosophies, all the important Indian philosophies today, Sankhya is included. I would say that's something like 80% of the content of these philosophies comes from Sankhya. Just what makes them really clearly different is all of them have some important addition of a super principle. That's what we don't have in Sankhya. Something like a Brahman in the Vedanta philosophy, or God in many Hindu philosophies. So in Shaiva Tantra, or also many of the Puranas dealing with Krishna are based on Sankhya, with the important addition that they don't end where Sankhya ends. They add a super principle, a God, or well, a Brahman is something like a world soul or a world principle. But all the rest of Sankhya is included. And the early masters were aware of this fact and they admitted it. Shankara said that everything that's in Sankhya is all right. There are only 2 points, but they are important points where we disagree. But all the rest is just important, and it remains so during all the later history of Vedanta tradition. So Sankhya is alive, just its name is no longer. Now, what is the philosophy of Sankhya? The name of the system comes from the Sanskrit word Sankhya, meaning number. This doesn't mean that Sankhya is a mathematical philosophy. It's not at all. It means that it's taking into account all the important factors of the word. And well, Sankhya does tell their numbers, but that was not specific to Sankhya. Classical Brahmanical tradition and also Buddhist tradition always told us which list is how long. This is 5 principles, this is 25 principles, and so on. So that's not specific for Sankhya. So the meaning is that it tries to be a comprehensive philosophy, understanding everything that's important in the world. But the approach is different from, say, standard European philosophies. European philosophies like to look at the universe, at the cosmos, whereas most Indian traditions focus more on the man, on the person, and that's what Sankhya does. So we could say that this is an anthropological metaphysics. So a complete metaphysics, but with a very, very strong emphasis on man, person. Now, Sankhya is a form of dualism, like many, many other philosophies. So a philosophy with 2 basic principles, that is soul and matter. That seems to be quite familiar, but the form it has in Sankhya is peculiar, it's Indian, it's a little known, little understood in Europe. Because yes, we have soul and matter, that's standard, but both soul, that is Purusha in Sankhya terminology, and matter, that is Prakriti, are quite different concepts from, say, the ideas of the standard European dualist, that is René Descartes in the 15th century. Because for him, matter was like, for most Europeans, something like dead mechanical matter, a system of billiard balls, something that can be perfectly described by Newtonian mechanics. Whereas Prakriti is not like that. Prakriti is alive. It's better to translate it as nature, or even Mother Nature, not simply as matter. On the other hand, Purusha, the soul principle of Sankhya, is again very much different from the European notions. Here, you would say that the soul is basically the mind thinking, as Descartes says, cogito, I'm thinking. That's what me, then that is the soul, the immortal part of a person. No, that's not the case in Sankhya. In Sankhya, thinking is a material process, a very, very refined material process, but still material. It's a function of the buddhi, the intellect. So Purusha is not thinking. Purusha is just mere pure consciousness. Often people say it's contentless consciousness. That's not that evident, but in any case, it is not the thinking process which is changing every minute. It's a stable, constant element of a person. This is a very, very important concept. So this Sankhya idea of Purusha, or consciousness, awareness, or subjectivity. Nowadays, it's easier to explain it than it was 100 years ago. I would say that if you had a robot, computer with a body and senses and everything like that, that could talk better English than I can, what would this robot miss? And that's what this robot would not have. That's Purusha, the subjectivity. The robot would be able to use the word I think, I feel, but that would be a lie. It would not be thinking, it would not be feeling. It's just an automatic process. So this difficult concept is at the heart of Sankhya, Purusha. why is it that Sankhya has this concept? And generally, many Indian systems have this concept. I think the explanation is not far to seek. It's coming from the close relation to yoga, not yoga asanas, but meditation. Indian people practice and have been practicing for thousands of years a form of meditation which is almost unknown in other parts of the world, that is emptying your mind. And if you are successful in emptying your mind, then you will have no thought processes. You will not perceive the world. Of course, you close your eyes and try to select a silent, peaceful place and so on, but still, what you experience is no thinking, no memories coming, and still you are there. So in India, people have a direct experience of their Purusha, this contentless subjectivity, whereas other traditions don't have this. Well, of course, Sankhya knows about our mind, and it has a very detailed description. So from a Sankhya point of view, the mind consists of 2 or rather 4 principles. If I say 2, then it will be only the Purusha and the material part of our minds called Antahkarana, internal organ, or in yoga tradition called Chitta. Sankhya likes to detail this concept into 3 factors. Part of it is buddhi. Buddhi is intellect, it's thinking, it's the normal conscious thought process. And it's also ahankara, which is literally the maker of I, the ego maker. In the Sankhya system, this is responsible for me identifying part of the world as me. This is my head, this is my shoulder, my body, and so on, whereas other things are not me. Sankhya thinks that nature is one and continuous. So this is not reality itself, this distinction. Still, it's basic for us, and that's what ahankara does. It's different from buddhi. It's not a thought process. We don't think of it. It just happens, goes on. It's sort of a automatic internal mechanism. It appears as a reality. And for Sankhya, it's that part of reality which makes it so difficult to realize the independence of Purusha. And the third factor in our mental setup is called manas, mostly translated as mind. That's completely misleading. So etymologically, it's the same word, but the meaning is completely different. So manas is not conscious. It's again an automatism. It's a connector or an interface between the internal and the external in both directions. So what my eyes see, what the eyes do actually, is just light and colors. But what my buddhi receives is not light and colors. I see objects, but I don't have any connection to the objects, only through my eyes. So that's what manas is doing in one direction. It transforms the information my setup transmits and rebuilds inside a picture of the external world, and that's what my buddhi sees. In the other direction, what I'm doing right now, lifting my hand, is done by my muscles. It's voluntary. Did I try to move my muscles? I did not. I wanted to lift my head. That's what I wanted to do. What manas does is translates this into move the relevant muscles and bones and so on. So this is an interface. So these 3 aspects are all material, very refined matter or nature, but still It's not the spiritual principle. It's changing. It's in causal relations, in contrast to the Purusha, which in Sankhya is eternal. Now, because time's almost up, I have just 2 sentences to say about Prakriti, which is a wonderful part of Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya analyzes Prakriti and it analyzes it into 3 gunas, and all of you know the gunas very well because they are the most strongly surviving effect of Sankhya. This is an ingenious system. Well, Thomas, like inertia or matter, is something like easy. Europeans have that. Rajas, energy, is again easy. Energy movement, Europeans have that. But in Sankhya, you have a third, that's sattva, that's information, structure, organization, cohesion. That's a third principle. And that's what European traditions, other traditions don't have. And with it comes the real word actually working. Without it, it would be meaningless. Okay, I'm afraid my time is up, so I'm finishing it right now. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Rusa, for a wonderful introduction to Sankhya philosophy. It's a very important concept, and the Purush and the Prakriti and its interface. And the last ones was the 3 gunas that you described. I hope that you have set the right ground for panel discussion. We have distinguished scholars on our panel, and I will introduce all of you to this panel. We are joined by Dr. Shivani Sharma, who is the head of the Department of Philosophy at Punjab University, and we have Dr. Renu Thakur. She is the head of the Center for the Swami Vivekanand Center for Interdisciplinary Studies at the Punjab University. We are joined by Dr. Ishwar, who is an Ayurveda Acharya, who practices Ayurveda. I think he can comment on the 3 gunas that you just described. And Dr. Shivani can then walk us through the rest of the panel to help me coordinate. You can unmute your mic. Yeah.
Very good evening, Professor Ruzsa, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Please pardon my pronunciation. It's a delight to listen to you, and it's a pleasure to introduce my colleagues and very old friends, Professor Bala Ganpati from Delhi University. He's heading the Department of Philosophy, and Professor Pratibha Sharma. She's in the Miranda House Department of Philosophy. And both of them excel in their fields. Professor Bala is from Andhra Pradesh, and his area of interest has been more in historiography of Indian philosophy, and of course phenomenology, socio-political thought. And Professor Pratibha has been more interested in Indian and Western epistemology. And to continue with Professor Renu, she has been a very dear colleague in Vivekanand Center. And if I might start up, may I, Akshay ji?
Yeah, I can quickly help you to finish your introduction by introducing a dear friend who is joined from University of Kentucky, USA. He is Vinod Srivastav. He's a master's in philosophy, and he's also a master's in social work. He's an alumnus of Punjab University, Dr. Shivani.
Yes, he's been my senior. I'm told that he's been my senior.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So, welcome, Vinod. There he is. So
yeah,
you can take over and shape the direction of the discussion.
So, all right. May I submit my views, Akshay ji?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and ask your questions, your comments, criticisms.
All right.
That is valuable to the audience who are listening to us.
All right. So just to set the stage start, Professor Ruzsa, I'm really enlightened with the clarity that you have given us on, especially when you mentioned that Sankhya has its traces in Manusmriti, that was something new to me. Thank you for that. And of course, being students of Indian philosophy, we know that it is claimed to be the earliest philosophy, and Upanishads claim so. And not only Upanishads, we do find Ayurveda and Sushrut Samhita. They are highly dependent on Sankhya philosophy, certainly, yes. And of course, there are many significant points, and I've noted them down for my own information and for my usage in future. But what I wanted to ask you is more a cross-discipline from Vedant. I wanted to know if you find any difference between the nature of Brahman of Advait with the concept of Purusha of Sankhya. Because Advait has to submit that the ultimate reality is a mix of Sat, Chit and Anand. What would you have to say about it?
Oh, well, the relation of Purusha to Brahman is clearly outlined already by Shankara. So the main difference is Purusha is personal. Everybody has their own Purushas, whereas there is only one Brahman. So that we seem to have distinct consciousnesses is on the Advaita Vedanta view is part of Maya. So that's an illusion. At the final truth level, there remains consciousness and only one consciousness, a single consciousness. Whereas in Sankhya, we remain separate. Even after liberation, our Purushas are distinct. So they don't merge into one, or at least nothing is mentioned about that. So it's a very clear difference. As for Satchidananda, well, consciousness is of course an essential feature both for Brahman and for Purusha. Existence, no need to mention, of course, all philosophies tell about their principles that they do exist. Well, of course, in Vedanta, when they say that Brahman is Sat, they mean that it's more fundamentally existent than our everyday word, which is not Sat, it's just Bhavati. It's a process, not a stable absolute existence. So, of course, Purusha is both Sat and Chit. Ananda is not mentioned. Actually, it's not so automatic even in Vedanta philosophy. So in the last something 6 or 7 centuries, it became standard. It was not that automatic for earlier tradition. It was not evident even for Shankaracharyas. He mentioned Ananda only when he was directly commenting on those Upanishad passages which were about Ananda. Otherwise, he rather forgot about it. And of course, in many Indian philosophies, just the opposite is clearly said. So in early Nyaya tradition, liberation is without happiness. It's also without suffering, but that's all. And Sankhya doesn't say this, but clearly Sankhya's aim is to free us from dukkha, from suffering, from pain. So it's not very clear if you have anything like Anand, joy or whatever for the liberated Purusha in Sankhya. So that's the difference.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any of the other panelists? Yeah, Dr. Pratibha seems to. You have to unmute your mic, Dr. Pratibha. Yeah, you're muted. The others can mute the mic while she speaks. We still can't hear you. I think there is a problem with the mic. No, we can't hear you. Kalyan, is there something you can do?
1 minute, ma'am. Yes, now it is unmute. You can speak.
You can try now.
No, ma'am,
I think
it is
there is a
not
problem
audible.
with your mic. We will move to the any other panelists who want to. Sorry about that. Dr. Bala wants to ask a question. Please go ahead, Dr. Bala.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Rusa, for this wonderful, lucid explanation of Sankhya that you have given. And I appreciate the lucidity of the talk because since it is on Facebook, probably you had general audience as well in your mind. So that was so nice that you made it very simple and you made it so simple that people would easily understand it. So thank you for that. And I also I should thank Akshay Anand for giving me this opportunity, Professor Akshay Anand and Shivani. Actually, you have placed Sankhya in a beautiful platform in this prelude that you have provided. In fact, I follow your Academia EDU. I read your articles as well because you are an expert on Buddhism. So that's where I get connected to your work. That's how I am acquainted with your work. And I was also looking at your work, Sankhya dualism without substances, where whatever you have just now said is part of the article that you have published already. Which means I'm just trying to make some acquaintance that already existed through intellectual discourse. One of the things that really fascinated me with Sankhya is, as we look at in Western philosophy, if we are looking at the beginnings of political science, then we go back to political philosophy, we go back to Plato and Aristotle. Similarly, any aspect of Indian knowledge system has to take us to Sankhya. Sankhya is so fundamental when it comes to any knowledge system. For example, if you are talking about Indian psychology, we necessarily have to go back to, we have to necessarily go back to Sankhya. So that is so fundamental in Indian tradition. You have rightly pointed out that. I was more interested in trying to understand how you have related it to the artificial intelligence scenario. For example, how consciousness of Purusha is related to or explained in terms of robo not being having the capacity to have consciousness. No, that's where I was looking at. Actually, if you can, I would rather towards the end, I would also ask you to comment on how do you look at this consciousness from Buddhist perspective as well. But for the time being, I would request you to respond to this because you try to show that even if the artificial intelligence enhances its capacity to do things like human beings, still something that doesn't it would have is consciousness. So how are you challenging artificial intelligence in some way or some form?
What I was trying to do is just to make the audience understand the concept of Purusha. I'm not saying that this is final truth. I'm not omniscient. Of course, I cannot know. So this is an idea. Of course, there are many people in artificial intelligence who would say that once a robot would have all the input systems we have, and all the complex processing abilities, then it would have also subjectivity. So that's what they think. That means that they would say that there's nothing in subjectivity, nothing to explain. It's just sort of automatic. If something processes information and it processes information about itself, then it has subjectivity. Well, I'm not convinced, but this is also not illogical, not an incoherent idea. So I cannot definitely promise you that once we will have artificial intelligence, it will have no subjectivity. I was just making a point to understand that if it will not have, But otherwise, it will work as well as a person would work. Then what it would miss, that would be the Purusha. So this was a conceptual explanation, not a scientific hypothesis how it will be. So it's just what I'm saying is that our kids are extremely intelligent. In many aspects, they have way more buddhi than we do. In other respects, of course, not, but in several respects, they are much better than us. How much consciousness do our computers have? I would say 0. Not a little, absolutely 0. So it seems that it is different. Whereas on the other hand, if you look at a puppy, a small newborn dog, I would say that probably it has very, very little buddhi. But I think, I have the feeling that it does have subjectivity. It has a Purusha or something like that, a function like that. Of course, I'm not making a metaphysical statement, but I'm explaining the concept. So it seems that the two things, information processing, very high level information processing, and subjectivity are unrelated. So it's not one comes from the other in either direction. No, two different things. A machine could be in a number of ways more intelligent than we are, and a very, very silly animal could have subjectivity. Of course, if it's really silly, like a tree, we will not be able to tell if it has a subjectivity or not. But intermediate level, simple, not very clever animals show all the signs of being subjects, feeling pain, suffering, fear, love. So, well, that's what I was trying to express.
Thank you, Dr. Ruzsa. I hope this satisfies you, Dr. Bala, or it raises more questions. I think your image is frozen, so probably you're out of internet. Dr. Pratibha, you wanted to ask something. You can even chat. You can write it. No, we still can't hear you. I'm so sorry. You can use the chat in the Zoom and you can type it. I will, on your behalf, I can ask him a question. Dr. Renu, you've been making a lot of notes, and we want to learn from your questions also. You are also muted. If you can unmute yourself and you can ask a question. You're still unmuted. You're still muted.
Am I audible?
Now is good, yeah.
Okay. So, thank you very much, Professor Ruzsa, for this beautiful lecture or a small exposition which you have made. It has really, really made me more interested in Indian philosophy. Though I studied Indian philosophy in my MPhil when I was doing, because I am from basically this discipline of ancient history. And suddenly a few things, cropped up in mind that what is Upanishadic philosophy, Aham Brahma Asmi, Tattvatamam Asi, all these things. And here, if we talk of Sankhya, so does this Sāṁkhya is an atheist philosophy, as Paul Davison also calls it? So that's the question which sometimes bothers me. How self and Brahm, are they two different entities? Or self and Brahma can meet somewhere?
Okay, I couldn't hear a little part of it. What entities are two different or not?
Yeah.
What was the question, the center point? What are those things that are different or not different? I couldn't hear that.
So should I repeat that?
Yeah, briefly.
Only briefly, because I heard most of you.
Self means the personal God and Brahma. So
Person and Brahma.
As Shivani ma'am also asked the same question, Purush is personal and Brahma is one. and it is a personal something, self and Brahm. So do they meet anywhere in Sankhya philosophy? As Paul Dawson says, it is atheist. They do not believe in God. So here, my take is whether we go with Dawson or we can think otherwise also. So that's my question. That's a layman question, please. I'm not expert in philosophy.
Yeah. So the relation of Purusha and Brahman, it's changing in history, of course. So earliest times, in Vedic times, Brahman was prayer and the force of the offering, something like a magical power, magical force. It later gradually acquired a new meaning in the middle and later Upanishads, where this magical force was understood as the fundamental force of the world, of the whole universe, and also gradually personified. This personification is just two separate branches. So we have a male personification of Brahman, and that's the god Brahma, the creator god, already in the epics. And you have a neuter Brahman. In most cases, so except in the nominative case, you just cannot distinguish the two words in Sanskrit. So it's not easy to say what is somebody talking about when they say that the word was created by Brahmana, that is by Brahma, the god, or by Brahman, the word soul. You cannot say that. So this is a gradual process, and the concept of Brahman, everybody nowadays knows in India, is relatively late. So from something like Shankaracharya, late clear idea of this abstract word soul or word essence. And when Sankhya was written, this was not a central idea. The word itself doesn't seem to appear in the Sankhya Karika, although we have a form which could be understood in either way, but I think that refers to Brahma, the creator god. So it says that now I have described the whole world, starting from Brahma down to a blade of grass. So from the topmost to the bottommost. I think that probably refers to the creator god of the epics, Brahma Pitamaha, so the great father. But of course, you cannot say. In any case, in Sankhya, any conscious being, so an ant or a worm or a mouse or a person or all gods are essentially the same. Everybody has their own Purushas. So we don't share the spiritual essence of any other being on Sankhya position. In Vedanta, they say that fundamentally there is only one consciousness, and Vedanta likes to call that Brahman, and our individual consciousnesses are an illusion created by our ahankara. Ahankara is a concept taken from Sankhya, but in Sankhya it has a different role. So in Sankhya it doesn't make the illusion of the private soul. It makes the illusion that part of the world belongs to me, the rest is not. So that I have a personal part, that my body and so on, my feelings, and the external world, which is not me. So in Sankhya, ahankara does this. In Vedanta, ahankara transforms our consciousness from the cosmic consciousness of Brahman to our private consciousnesses. So an inherited concept, but with a somewhat modified function. Is that an answer to your question or not?
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks.
So we have someone on the Facebook showing interest. This is Dr. Piyush. She has a question for you, Dr. Ruzsa. He asks, the notion of ontological dualism held by Sankhya is rejected by most of the neuroscientists. while yoga and mindfulness are studied in the field, devoid of their original physical assumptions. What are your thoughts on this, on the directionality of research from a perception of a scholar of this tradition? Can yoga be understood in the naturalistic term, devoid of the associated metaphysical assumptions held by Sankhya?
So if I understand the question correctly, it's about modern science's general physicalism versus Sankhya's dualism. Well, okay, most of modern science is physicalist, and that does not mean that it rejects dualism. It means that simply this question is not a question of most of the sciences. It's not a question of physics. It can be, could be a question in neurosciences, in psychology, but not very much the concept that Sankhya has. So far, this is a very abstract concept. You know, science observes things that can be observed, that can be measured, tested, and so on. Now, Purusha is a very, very abstract concept. If you very, very strongly believe that it's there, you have a subjective experience of it, or for whatever reasons, you are absolutely convinced, still you cannot devise an experiment that could, in theory, prove the existence of Purusha. That's improvable. So we feel if sentient being has subjectivity and so on, but that's a feeling that can be mistaken. That's not a scientifically observable fact. So this last question of metaphysics is not within the field of sciences. Therefore, proper scientists don't say anything of it when they are doing science. Of course, a scientist might have philosophical views and can share it with anybody, but a proper scientist does make the distinction. I'm saying this as a physicist or as a doctor or whatever, and then there must be experiments and proofs and facts. Or I'm saying this as a philosopher, as somebody trying to interpret not only what I can measure, but also what I subjectively experience. So that's two different things. It's simply not true that modern science is materialist. It's materialist in the sense that it can observe only matter. It can ask questions about the physical reality. That's what it can measure. So it does this because it can do this. It doesn't say anything about soul, or it doesn't say anything about God. It can say something about whether God is interfering our everyday lives, because that would be measurable. But if there is a non-material God, science does not have a position on that. Actually, quite a number of scientists are theists, so they do believe in God, but you cannot say it if you read their scholarly works. It's simply not clear. It's often not clear even with philosophers. I remember having asked a question from Hilary Putnam, absolutely being sure that he must be a strong physicalist. And he said that, well, this doesn't belong here, but actually I'm personally believing Jew. I do believe in God. So in spite of him being not a scientist, being a philosopher and quite a modern analytic mind. So it's just not the field of science, the existence of a non-material entity, be it a soul, be it a god or a devil or whatever. It's just not a scientific question. Science has no position on that. Therefore, it doesn't speak of it. It doesn't mean it's denying it. It's just not talking about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Shivani wants to know, I'm going to come to you. if Purush and Prakriti are equal realities, why must humans aspire for Kaivalya? And if they are really equal, they should just be happy with Prakriti. Can you also explain Samadhi of yoga? What does it mean to, if Samadhi of yoga is what Kaivalya stands for? So
Well,
basically, if Purush and Prakriti are equal, why should we aspire for Kaivalya?
You cannot say equal or not equal. In Sankhya, they both do exist. That's not an equality. A king exists and a beggar exists. They are not equal. Completely different. But both equally exist, and both are parts of our being in Sankhya. Samadhi is a term not actually used in the Sankhya Karika. That's a deep meditative phase, basically used in yoga terminology as the eighth member or limb of the Ashtanga Yoga. This have many different interpretations within the Yoga Sutra itself. So it can have content and can have no content. The first two sutras of the Yoga Sutra very clearly says something which comes close to this this contentless Purusha. The first Yoga Sutra says, after the introductory sentence, that yoga chitta vritti nirodha, that is, yoga is the suppression of the activity of the chitta, of the mind. And the next sutra says, tadadrashtuhu svarupe vasthanam. At that time, the seer, that's just standing for Purusha, the witness. At the time, the seer is in its own form. So it's very clearly the same idea which we have in yoga. We have a drashtu or a Purusha, which you can meet in that sort of deep meditation, which is a contentless meditation, which is not true of all the forms of samadhi in the Yoga Sutra. There are very many different ways of meditation mentioned in the Yoga Sutra. Only one of them is this completely emptying your mind. But yoga is traditionally absolutely Sankhya. Even in the Yoga Sutra, you feel this, and in the standard commentary of Yoga Sutra, that is normally called Vyasa Bhashya, because its author is called Vyasa, which means actually only editor, whatever. So the classical commentary is even entitled Sankhya Pravachana Bhashya. So a commentary explaining Sankhya or explaining alone Sankhya, and it is very clearly Sankhya text. So yoga and Sankhya are closely related, not necessarily. So if you consider yoga as meaning, and probably that was the original meaning, just practice. Practice is not bound to a single philosophy. So many yoga practitioners do just practice without any philosophy. They can be materialists, Christians, whatever. In India, many yoga practitioners are very firmly rooted in Vedanta. So that's all possible. You can practice with different philosophies, different religions. Practice can be the same. Yeah, there was a hinted question about Buddhism. So it seems, it's not that clear, but it seems that the Buddha said, I understand Sankhya position. The problem is that I do not find the Purusha. I'm meditating and I'm not finding it. What I'm finding is only the changing mental processes, and then it stops. It's quite clear that the Buddha was a great practitioner of meditation. It's just how he interpreted his meditational experiences. I'm quite sure that they had the same experience. One person said that's the Sankhya yoga position, that what we find now is the viewer, the soul, purely without any processes. The Buddha said something like that. No, it's just your mind. It's nothing else. It just stopped most of its workings, and that's quite possible. So, a Buddhist without any belief in soul, or a materialist, not even a Buddhist, without any belief in soul, can experience deep meditational states without any fluctuation of the mind. So that's not coming from philosophy. Philosophy gives an interpretation, and different interpretations are possible.
Thank you, Dr. Ruzsa. Now we can let me read out Dr. Pratibha's question. She was not able to use the mic before I come to
Can
Bala
I also
and
come
Dr.
in
Ishwar.
for a minute?
Yeah. Okay, Dr. Bala.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I lost my connectivity in between, so I couldn't continue the discussion, Professor Rusa. Yeah, that's a wonderful response that you have given to the extent that I could listen to, because of the connectivity problem. There are two things that I would like to request you to respond to. One is there is a very interesting point that you are making in the article that I have referred to, which is regarding the dualism of Sankhya. And you seem to be joining my very good friend Paul Squeizer in arguing that Sankhya dualism resolves or avoids, at least, some of the most fundamental problems of Western dualism. Can you please respond on that a little bit? And the second one is the reductionism that you're talking about, substance reductionism that you advocate, right? I understood that you advocate substance reductionism, but
Substantial relation, no.
No, substance reductionism, right? No?
Sorry.
Okay. Substance reductionism.
Substance reductionism.
Reductionism, yeah.
Yes.
So if you can respond to these two, I would be glad. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's not over important, but a clear trend in Sankhya. So that substance would be something like Prakriti, but Prakriti is nothing but the three gunas, and guna means quality. So if something is nothing else but its qualities, that's a substance reductionism. So it's clearly present in Sankhya. Nobody ever tried to reduce Purusha. So Purusha, you could say, well, there is one real strong substance. But on the other hand, Purusha is not a good substance, because a substance has qualities, whereas Purusha does not have qualities. So in a sense, you can say that in Sankhya, you don't have classical substances. It's a dualism related to substance dualism, but both substances are non-standard, anomalous. And therefore, the way the Buddha went with this into a complete rejection of substances is fairly logical and basically coherent with the Sankhya approach. Now, I'm sorry, but I have to leave this discussion. I'm having right now a very important exam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruzsa, for spending time with us. I know we have exceeded our time limit. It only shows that this was a very engaging and compelling discussion. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank all the panelists, as well as seek forgiveness from our panelist, Dr. Ishwar, who couldn't ask a question. I could see him. If you don't mind taking a very quick question from him.
Don't mind, next time.
Or do you want to quickly ask?
We'll be taking a question next time.
No, but do you want to quickly ask one question? It's short.
No, sir. No, thank you. This is a long question. I will do it the next time.
we had a lot of good responses from Facebook. And thank you, Dr. Shivani. Thank you, Dr. Renu, Dr. Bala, Dr. Ishwar, Dr. Pratibha, Dr. Vinod Srivastava, who joined us from the US. And I hope we have a part 2 session, which is more experimental. I'm told that the Department of Philosophy at Punjab University are looking at some intervention studies with regard to philosophy. So we hope to engage you again, Dr. Rusa. I hope you will agree to come again. With that, we will close the session, and we also invite the panelists as well as you to please submit some good write-up commentary that we can publish in this journal, Integrative Medicine Case Report, as we are dedicated to integrating the best evidences from the East and West towards health, and it can be philosophy also. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming, and thanks for enlightening us. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you,
and
Dr. Akshay.
commenting on wonderful. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Bala. Thank you,
Shivani.
Pratibha, for joining
Thank you,
in.
Pratibha.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.